All right, this is my buddy Major Hayden's coming up here. Major's going to talk about something that's on all of our minds, security. And he's going to teach us how to automate security using Ansible. Are y'all ready for this? There it is. Now that's some love. Give it up, y'all, for Major Hayden.
All right, can you hear me in the back? All right, cool. So my name is Major. I work for Rackspace. I work in our Rackspace private cloud group. So I work on clouds that we deploy in a customer data center, in our own data centers, wherever they need to be. And what I'm going to be talking about today is some of the work we've been doing in the community, and I'll have a little bit of a call to action at the end to get involved if you do development with Ansible or if somebody on your team does. And feel free to come sit up here if y'all want to. Don't be afraid. I don't bite and I don't spit very much either. So as I said, I'm a principal architect at Rackspace. Been there since about 2006. I've been working with OpenStack since 2012 and been a member of the Fedora community since 2011. And so the agenda today is pretty simple. What we're going to talk about is the security tug-of-war that we have within all of our companies. What we're also going to do is talk about a concept called meeting halfway, which how many people in here have ever worked in a corporate security department or information security, anything like that? I see, some people afraid to raise hands in the back. I know how that feels. So I've worked on both sides, and so meeting halfway can kind of be one of those fun things. And then finally, as I said, I'll have an appeal, a call to action to get involved in the community and get involved in our project. And so to kick it off, I'll start with something that I think we all can agree upon, and that's that information security is difficult. It's difficult because the technology we use is complex. If you think about traditional environments where you just had one server doing one thing, that's pretty complex. Now when you have 60 VMs that are all doing different things for different parts of your company on the same server, that becomes very complex. And security has some other issues too around culture. We constantly fight culture battles within our company of how much security do we want and how much do we not want. But in the end, at every company, we want to create just enough security that creates value for our customers. We want customers to trust the product, to trust that they can put their data in the product, to trust that they know that product is going to be available for them, and if not, there's a plan to get it available again. But on the flip side of that, we want to avoid all those changes that cause drag and disruption, those things that kind of show up and disrupt your workflow, the things that make you have to log into something differently, things that make you have to operate a cloud differently. Those things are really annoying. And as anybody who's worked in information security will know, if the auditors aren't happy, nobody's happy. So if your employees love your security and your information security folks love the security, but the auditors don't like it, it's a long day. When they show up and they start looking at your processes and they want to see what they look like, if they don't see what they want, it kind of derails everyone's day, week, month, year. So the big question is, how do we make valuable security changes without disruption and keep the auditors happy? And so our answer to that is make security automatic. And I know that sounds very easy. But what we're looking to do is make security into something that you forget about. You run it, it's there, it's the basics, you're done. And so that's what we did as part of the OpenStack-Ansible community. We said, how do we add a layer of security for every single host to where people didn't have to think about it? And maybe it's something you could apply to an OpenStack environment, or maybe it's something you could apply if you have a LAMP stack running on a server in your data center, you could use the same role. And so when things get complex and the going gets tough, the tough people adopt standards. So you may have heard certain standards like ISO or NIST 853 or the STIG or Center for Internet Security or SANS, things like that. People go backwards and adopt those standards and set that bottom layer and say, look, this is our security standard layer. This is something we don't argue about. This is something we agree upon that's important, and then we grow from there, and you kind of raise that bar. And so a lesson that I had to learn the hard way when I worked in our corporate security department is that people really have to feel that security is something they're a part of, not something being done to them. I'm sure, how many times have people, raise your hand if you ever felt like you had security done to you. So if you flew here through the airport, you felt like security was done to you. That's a pretty good example. I always enjoy that myself. But people need to feel like they have a say in it. They need to know the value behind it. They need to know what they're getting out of it, what the trade-offs are, all that kind of thing. So as an example of this, if you talk to developers in your own company or people who are deploying applications, here's two options. The first one, if you as the information security folks show up and say this, as developers, you don't know how to secure systems properly, we'll tell you what to do, and you must have it done within 3 months. And if you don't, you can't take credit cards. How does that feel? as a deployer. That feels terrible. Like this is the logic that I use to get my 5-year-old son to go to bed when he won't go to bed. This doesn't work very well in a large company. But as an alternative, you can say something like, since you use Ansible, we wrote some automation that fits into your existing deployment method. It won't disrupt your production environments. Can we work with you to test it? And look at the difference in the language in there. If someone has recognized what people are using to deploy something and said, hey, look, we've built something that will cause you the least pain possible and give you some value, and we want to work with you to test it. And so that's where this role that we created in this automated security for OpenStack got started. So we thought about 5 things as we started to build this. We need to make it easy to implement, simple to maintain, and it has to be non-disruptive to an existing cloud. I don't think any of us would like it in here if the corporate security team came and said, okay, I'm going to come secure your machines, and then the whole cloud goes down during the process. That'd be the last time they're ever invited to a meeting ever again. And it also needs to be effective against attacks, and it has to be open and transparent. If it's not open and transparent, people don't believe in the value. They don't understand why it's there. And so also our friends in the payment card industry also require standards. And a lot of our customers have to deal with this. And you have to deploy these standards that are industry accepted. You have to prove that they're deployed. And then when the auditors show up, you have to show them the policy, and you have to show them the technology that says you're doing it. And so this role helps you do that. So to get started, we had to pick the right standard. So some of these standards are as long as novels. So has anybody in here read ISO 27002 or 27001 cover to cover? I saw some blank stares from people. It's rough. It covers everything from human resources to computers to how you deal with people getting in the front door of your facility. It's great content, but it's not specific. And then also very few directly apply to Ubuntu. You can find a whole bunch of examples of things that apply to RHEL or SUSE or something like that, but getting it to apply to Ubuntu is a little bit difficult. And some have very restrictive licenses. We had some where we asked to use the product, we asked to build something based on it, and they said, you can't unless you pay us money. And we say, well, how much money? And they said, never mind, you just can't. So we got into some very tricky situations. So what we settled on was the Defense Information Systems Agency publishes the Security Technical Implementation Guide. And this guide contains over 200 changes that you make in your environment to provide that base level of security. And I'll go through a list of those here in a second. The great thing about it, it's out in the public domain. It's very, very specific to what you need to do on different hosts, whether it's Linux, Windows, Java systems, anything like that. And it covers the most critical security domains. So everything from how you boot the system, how you log into it, how you deal with file permissions, how you monitor for file changes, and all the way down to system call auditing. And so a lot of people forget about auditing. If you use Red Hat, you probably know Audit D is hanging out there in the background. This is the thing that will tell you if someone is rapidly trying to access files and directories that they're not supposed to access. So what you can do is take those logs, pipe it into some kind of event system, maybe a SIEM, and alert on that. And so if all of a sudden you see 50,000 denied file accesses in 2 minutes, then maybe that's a time to go in that environment and find out what's going on. So really what we did, to simplify this down even further, we took the DISA STIG for RHEL 6 and Ansibleized it. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm going to go ahead and use it. But we turned it into Ansible roles and tasks. And then what we said was, which one of these is going to cause a problem with an OpenStack deployment? So some of them in there say, disable IPv6 on your entire environment. Does anybody use IPv6 in here? I do in my OpenStack environment, and if I turned it off, I'd have some problems. So some things like that we turned off. Other things was disable forwarding on bridges. That also is pretty terrible in a virtualized environment. So we took those things out. And then finally, we translated it for Ubuntu. So there's some things that don't directly translate. So in Red Hat, you have yum, and Ubuntu, you're going to have apt. And then there's other subtle differences of what packages are available or what packages aren't available. So how many people have used Ansible at some point? Okay, small set. So I'll just cover it super briefly. So if you've ever used anything like Puppet, Chef, SaltStack, maybe CF Engine, hopefully not, it's a configuration management and deployment framework. The really nice thing about Ansible compared to some of the others is that it's written only in Python. It's very easy to read the source. And also, you don't have to install an agent on the other side. You don't have to go and install a whole slew of packages and libraries and everything on the other side. All you need is Python. If you got Python and SSH, you're done. And if you're deploying an OpenStack environment without Python, I'm not really sure how that's possible. And so OpenStack-Ansible is a project that we started at Rackspace and gave to the community, and now we're working with the community to improve it. And what it does, it gives you a production-ready OpenStack cloud by breaking out all the little pieces like Keystone, Nova, and all that into a very, very easy deployment mechanism where you can pick and choose what you want, where you want it, how you want it deployed, and then upgrades and everything are very easy. And so what we did was we created a security hardening role. So if you're not familiar with an Ansible role, it's just a group of things that you want done to a server. And you package them together into a role so that they can travel together and be applied together. So there's two main components. One side is the actual role itself, the actual things that you want to do to the server. And the other half of it is the documentation that comes with it. Because when the auditors show up, they want to be able to see the policy, and they want to be able to see the implementation. And so the really nice thing is that both of those are included inside the role. And as I'll go into it in a minute, there's also an auditing capability as well that you can use. So as I said before, it applies over 200 security configurations in 90 seconds. After the first time you run it, it'll only take about 30 seconds to run. So if you make any quick changes or make any configuration adjustments, it only takes about 30 seconds to get back going. When the auditors show up and you run it in check mode, you'll be done in less than 60 seconds. They'll have complete output that you can give to them, give them the documentation, and then show them what you're applying. And as I said, it has the built-in auditing mode, and it's meant to be non-disruptive. So we run this role in the OpenStack-Ansible testing jobs, like the gate jobs. This has probably run in the gate maybe, I don't know how many thousands of times in the past 3 or 4 months. So it's been run and very heavily tested, and in some large environments. And so the value of the documentation is that you actually get an explanation of what came from the STIG, so what did the STIG ask you to change? So for this example right here, it says, you may have operating system accounts on your machine that are not locked. So these are system users. This is not users like you and I would have on the system. But it'll search through and find any of these user accounts which should not be there and alert you to it. And there's a link that takes you to the STIG viewer, which is a very colorful, easy to read way to understand that particular component. And then finally, at the end, we put a bunch of notes for deployers. But the great thing is these notes are great for auditors, too. So it'll let you know and say, hey, we may have turned this off by default because it derails an OpenStack environment. And so when your auditor says, why are you not applying this control, you can actually show them what we've written and say, this is an exception for us because if we did this, we can't run an OpenStack cloud. And then also, the documentation will reference a lot of configuration that you can change. So there's certain requirements that are set by the STIG for your SSH server. For example, like how long someone can have an active connection before the connection gets cut, or if the root user can log in directly. And so those things are all configurable. So if in your environment, you log in directly as root, which you can come talk to me afterwards, and I'll give you 100 reasons why you shouldn't have that enabled, you can set that in here. And the great thing is, too, is that you can go and customize this for your particular environment. So if you actually want to wrench this down, if you want to make it to where if a connection lasts longer than 60 seconds and it's idle, kill it, you can go in and make that as well. And then you can show it to the auditor. And the configuration is fairly straightforward. It's just simple Ansible variables. Some of them are true, false, yes, no. And then there's a little bit of documentation right above it inside the configuration. And it'll also refer to the V number you see there, links you back to the STIG. So you can go straight back to the STIG and go find out where that was in there and get some more detail on it. And so as you see right here at the bottom, it may be hard to see, it's a little bit of an eye chart. If you flip the SSH permit root login to no and rerun the role, it'll go back and change the SSH configuration for you. And then if you flip it to yes, rerun the role, it'll go and change the configuration for you. And then some other ones, all of the Booleans are kept together. So all the configuration for Audit D is all in one place. And you can pick and choose what you want to turn on and turn off. And as you can see on the right, there's the V number, so you can go straight back to the STIG and understand what you're getting and what you're not getting when you turn that on and off. And so some of these we've turned off for you by default because they will crush your system to a halt. So if you're in a very special environment where that doesn't hurt you, you can go and turn those things on. And so to start to wrap up, everyone asked me at some point, say, well, how do I get this magical thing? So first off, if you're already using OpenStack-Ansible in the community, you could just flip the apply security hardening variable to true and deploy. That's it. You're done. Seriously, about 2 minutes, and you're out the door. And it's available in Liberty, Mitaka, and Newton. In Mitaka and Newton, it's already enabled for you by default. You'll have to turn it off if you don't want it. In Liberty, you'll have to turn it on. And if you're a Rackspace Private Cloud customer, it's coming in 12.2. I've been told I'm not allowed to give dates, so I'll just leave it as it is there. And then if you don't use either one of those things, you can actually use this with any other Ubuntu 14.04 server that you have in your environment. If it's running a LAMP stack, that's totally fine. If it's running a big Java app, that's totally fine. You can go in there and run it with that. And so we have documentation that will tell you exactly how to implement that into other playbooks that you might have. And so the road ahead for us is we want support for Ubuntu 16.04, which just came out, and we also want to support CentOS 7 as well. So we've had a lot of requests for that. And then the new RHEL 7 guidelines are coming out. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with Systemd, but that's a new thing now. It's very exciting. So we want to get that in there. We want to have a little bit better reporting, so it's even easier for you to have that conversation with your auditors. And then also you as a deployer can go and show to your upper level folks and say, hey, look at how we're improving. Look at the security controls we have now that we didn't have before. And then finally, we want to get to the point to where we can go through certain OpenStack services and alert you to bad configurations. So if you have something set up in a way that's not recommended, we'll alert you to it and give you a better recommendation. So that's in the road ahead. So if you want to get involved, we have the OpenStack-Ansible Developer Summit going on, well, actually the rest of today, Thursday, and Friday. We had a full room in there earlier with people from some very large organizations that I did not know were using it. We're also on IRC and Pound OpenStack-Ansible. We're always in there. We've got folks from Australia, Europe, and US. So if you ask a question, there's almost guaranteed to be somebody in there at some time of day, depending on how much coffee they've had. And of course, you can send something to the mailing list as well. We have links here. These are a little bit long, but the slides will be available. And those are links to our documentation and the actual source code itself. And so with that, that's it for me. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions out there for Major? Any questions? Any questions? Does this sound useful to y'all? Interested in downloading and using this? Very cool stuff. If you have questions, you can ask them now, or you can catch up with Major right after the session, or find them in IRC. All right, I appreciate it, y'all. Thanks so much for being a very attentive audience. Thank you, Major.